The Articles of Confederation. This is probably one of the most overlooked areas of American history, but it is important. Constitutionally, it is important in the sense of the bridging the gap between the principles of the American Revolution and the readiness of some to have a much more powerful national government with the Constitution. There's this interim time following the revolution itself, and really at the ending half of the American Revolution, where we have this push for and eventually the acceptance of this document called the Articles of Confederation. And what is a confederation? A confederation is a league or a team or an alliance. It's a grouping, in this case, of states. There are some confederations that still exist, like the Swiss cantons, the different divisions of Switzerland are a confederation, meaning they have some independency, but they also join together for some common purposes. And what a confederation means is not that there is one government to rule them all, if you will, to borrow some language from Lord of the Rings, but that there are, in this case, in the American context, 13 separate governments that agree to join together, and they have this document that kind of defines that relationship, the nature of their joining together. What are the states agreeing to? Now, they give up a few powers, but very few, and all those powers are defined in the document. That's important to be aware of. But we need to look at today why the Americans were hesitant to confederate, even in the colonies, because there were early attempts. But the overall question is, what were the Articles of Confederation? Were they needed, and why were they replaced? I always start out talking about the Articles of Confederation, asking the question to students, what was the first constitution for the American states? Not accepting their own state constitutions, but what was this first constitution called? What was the name of that, the first U.S. Constitution? And a lot of people just know, okay, well, I only knew about the one, right? Isn't there only one? And I say, well, yes, you're thinking of the second. It's called the Constitution. And that's the longest standing written constitution so far in history. However, there was a first constitution that lasted for a much shorter time between the states, and it had kind of a different nature to it. And that is called the Articles of Confederation. If we just take constitution to being a simple agreement between parties, this is what the Articles of Confederation was. But the Articles of Confederation are actually a little bit surprising because the states accepted them. And if you know something of the history of attempts to get the colonies to join in any type of confederation, they did not trust it. They did not want that until this point. And this is an important step. And many even didn't trust this step of moving toward the Articles of Confederation. Let me talk about some early Confederation attempts. This is James II of England, who was on throne of England in the late 1600s. And during this time, there are the American colonies. And his plan is to get the northern colonies of the New England region, so like Massachusetts, Connecticut, those colonies in that area. He wants to get them to come together into a confederation. And so he names this the Dominion of New England. Now, this would be one thing if it was natural. They were already wanting this. They had already had some form of maybe agreement to fight together if they were attacked, or, some other like trade agreement or something of that nature. But James II forced this concept on these New England colonies without their consent. They were not willing to confederate, and so he forced them to confederate, which made them even more loath to the idea. And so the Confederacy included many of these New England colonies, and he appointed this man, Sir Edmond Andros, to be the kind of governor of these colonies, the kind of absolute ruler of these colonies over one government centered in Boston. So you could imagine, if you don't live in Boston and your colony is not there, and you have your own government in your colony, and now leadership and rulership is coming from another colony that has a different culture, maybe has a different religious convictions, has different laws, has different expectations, whatever the case may be. And now power is seated there. And that means taxes, presumably, will be going there. And the tax money will be spent there, right? All appointed by the king. And so Sir Edmond Andros was set up in Boston in December of 1686 as governor of the Dominion of New England. And it's said by one author that James II could not have picked a better instrument for the fulfillment of his grand design to smash all self-government, meaning Sir Edmond Andros was a tyrannical leader who wanted to centralize control, to abuse power, and to take away the governing of themselves, local self-government, and to bring that into his governorship. And so you can start to see that whether or not the American colonies had to participate in this, for example, Virginia didn't participate in this, they are seeing this event take place. And now, whenever they didn't confederate before on their own, but now whenever they think of confederation, they will be reminded of the Dominion of New England, the tyranny of Edmond Andros, and the tendency toward centralizing government power into the hands of a few in a certain location. And so the Dominion of New England was meant to oppose this central authority and absolute government on all the northern colonies. And it might have been possible that it would have attempted to expand further. By 1687, Andros was basically the absolute ruler of all New England. He had weaved together control of this region in a way of which the people were not appreciative. And so this first Confederation attempt starts to create in the minds of the Americans that whenever they hear Confederation, joining together in a team or an alliance, whereas it might have been a little bit more neutral, they're now going to be highly suspicious, because they're going to see it as an attempt for a power grab by someone in their government. What brought this to an end was actually an event in Britain. In England, the Glorious Revolution took place in 1688, and that would affect the ending of the Dominion of New England. The Glorious Revolution is a bloodless revolution in which the dual monarchs, William of Orange and his wife Mary, who is James II's daughter, return to England and remove James from the throne without a fight. They're welcomed there. The Catholic James II is removed by his Protestant daughter, Queen Mary, and her husband, William of Orange. 1693, later, first American university, or the oldest now American university, will be established in Williamsburg, Virginia, the College of William and Mary. And their color, the traditional Protestant color, is orange, after William of Orange. And Thomas Jefferson will later attend the College of William and Mary. It's kind of the version of, while the northern New England areas would have their Harvards and Yales, the College of William and Mary would kind of be that important college university in the South. But anyway, the Dominion of New England made the colonies suspicious of attempts to unite them together, especially against their will. So now they would have to be on a voluntary basis if it was going to be in any way successful. And after William and Mary took the throne, Sir Edmond Andros in New England and Boston lost his position. He was no longer required to do this, and because he had been appointed by Mary's father, James II, and so he was removed from his post, and the Dominion of New England ended in failure. So this attempt to get the colonies to join in a confederation failed. Another early confederation attempt that happened later than the first one is the Albany Plan, put forth by Benjamin Franklin. And it gave us also one of the famous flags that would be iconic of the American Revolution, the join or die flag with a cut up snake. Now that becomes more timely and relevant as sort of the message changes to, we must join together to defend ourselves against Britain later on. But Franklin has this flag put together in this time to say, look, we're all separated as if we're this cut up snake. We need to join together. And so he had this plan to create a unified government between the 13 colonies. He wrote that under one government, as far as might be necessary, defense and other general important purposes. So his goal was defensive. Makes more sense. We maybe are smaller and more vulnerable to attack, but if we join together, we have a better chance of standing together against outside attack. And maybe other general purposes. Maybe they regulate trade tariffs so that you're not having to pay different amounts of taxes every time you cross borders of a colony into another to do business. So, those other things. Who knows also what would have taken place, what those general purposes would have been. But the colonists were very suspicious of this, and every colony unanimously rejected the plan. None of the colonies in 1754 were interested in uniting. It's kind of interesting that a lot of times it's still called the United States even before the entity of the United States exists. It's not. The colonies were not one people. They were not united. They were British. They were on one landmass. They spoke commonly one language. They had often a similar religion. They had varying traditions of Christianity for the most part. They were all under the British crown. However, they did not view themselves as a united whole. They were not one nation under God by any means. So every colony rejected this plan. And I joke sometimes that this was his face after they rejected it. There's a meme that talks about Benjamin Franklin's face looks like all of us when somebody sneaks in and steals our parking spot. Displeasure. But anyway, Franklin's summary of this event was that he said the colonial assemblies, meaning the governments of the colonies at the time, the local elected governments, said the colonial assemblies and most of the people were narrowly provincial in outlook, mutually jealous and suspicious of any central taxing authority. That's interesting. So being provincial, what he means by that is focused on your own local province, that your mind does not expand to all the concerns of all the countries and all the places of the world. You may hear about some of those, but your focus is at home. Your focus is your own local self-government, where you may or may not have more control, but you are most affected by the surrounding governmental situation. And so he said that he characterized this as provincial. He says that they're provincial in outlook, mutually jealous, meaning that they guarded carefully their own rights to local self-government. They didn't want to unite together and then have a majority of the other colonies in the Confederation start trying to tell other states what to do. Because now, hey, look, we're all together. We all agreed. Now do this, do things our way, follow our ideas, follow our rules, follow our laws, pay our taxes, that type of thing. And then he says, and suspicious of any central taxing authority. And so he says that the colonies did not want to unite because there would have to be some sort of document agreeing to this, and then there would have to be some sort of gathering where they would send people to represent them, and the colonies may have to pay for this. And where would that be located? North, middle colonies, south? Wouldn't that influence it? Wouldn't that give them a home field advantage? What if the colonies vote for and want different things? What if they agree to taxes and then the central governing authority starts to dictate now to the colonies or the states what they are to do? So the American tradition to this point is actually very suspicious of Confederation attempts. So why did they eventually accept the Articles of Confederation? What drew the Americans to finally accept, even reluctantly, this new document where the states did have to give up powers, even though they may be minimal relative to what we're used to today? What was the event that drove them to do that? And we'll see next time that it was the pressure of the American Revolution. And we'll also look into the content of the Articles of Confederation that influenced the U.S. Constitution. It became a stepping stone to that greater power in the U.S. Constitution.